So where in that chapter are you all at?
We haven't started.
Oh, okay. So you have finished the yak horn.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody was asking me kind of randomly, like, what is this yak horn business? I suppose they were listening to something that Zhong Sai Kensei Muche was talking about. Some yak horn. I remember somewhere he's talked about that, but I don't remember exactly. And I said, well, I think, yeah, I'm sure it was something that kind of shocked Rei Chungpa enough to humble Rei Chungpa. But today, we're talking about like the phone. The whole universe is in the phone, not just, Milarepa in a yak horn. You go to the phone, like how can something so big go into something so small?
Yeah.
So so there were, Jedi mind tricks for sure, but the bigger point of that is how limiting our concepts are. And since concepts is basically, for all intents and purposes, is how we encounter both ourselves and the world, not just how we encounter the world, it includes how we encounter ourselves. To the degree that there's a self to be encountered, all of that is occurring through concepts. Can we be free of concepts? Apparently so. Those are called Buddhists. But putting aside whether can or cannot be free from concepts, I think, because there's not much point to dwell too much on whether we can or cannot be free from concepts. I think the point that is more relevant to us is to not forget how we experience whoever we think self is, we experience whatever we think other is. All of that is through and in concepts. Through concepts, in concepts, by concepts. So Milarepa, having gone inside a yak horn, is what Rechungpa experienced. And of course, in their own time, that is, pretty like amazing. But now it's like if you think about the little chip, that is in the phone. It's like how in the world, I have no idea. It just blows my mind that that's all happening. The whole like and beyond. I mean the formal canon, so to say, in Tibetan Buddhism, it's huge. But what is found in the Tibetan religious world or period Tibetan world is many times the size of the canon. And to think that almost all of it is available inside your phone, the kinds of research that can be done, the kind of compiling of texts and composition of new texts. It's like just in the past, it required kind of like access first to physical texts, and then being able to read those texts and figure out where things are, Now just do a search, you know, and it'll pull up all the instances that this particular phrase turns up. And more, you know, that kind of that kind of ability is turning up. Anyway, yeah, this story of the yak horn, for me, that story itself, of course, there are many other songs in there, but the story itself, it's a reminder on that that these that we are currently, you know, like experiencing concepts through concepts, and in turn generating and reinforcing those concepts. Just to know that makes things, I think, a little less tight, you know, a little less tight, including concepts of, you know, the world is now in a bad place or the world is now in a good place. A little less tight.
Say that you're knowing that fact
Mm-hmm.
and concept. Is that the same thing as like in some level experiencing that fact? Because concepts can be not related at all to actually what's going on. So if you're just understanding something through concepts, that's still, is that very close to actually knowing what you're talking about? I mean, it's like, don't you have to kind of experience it on some level and know that you're experiencing that they are concepts? You know what? You know, the transparency, I think they would say transparency of what you're experiencing. Sorry to go off into the weeds like that, but I kind of wonder about, you know, that, you know.
Yeah, just experience it.
Yeah, experiencing.
Don't conceptualize experience.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's like connection between concepts and knowing. That's an interesting bridge.
It's easy to get into these loops in the there's an expression in some sutras. It's the expression comes from apparently this one incident where, due to a temporary mental defect, this one disciple looks into a mirror and thinks that he has lost his head. Of course, he's, you know, looking at the mirror with his eyes, which normally is, you know, part of his head, but he can't see his head and he thinks he has lost his head. So then he runs around looking for his head and asking people where his head has gone. And so finally, when this was brought to the Buddha's attention, the Buddha says, you know, this is how the world is, you know. Already with one head running around looking for a head to put on top of that head. I think on the gut level, we, for lack of better expression, we get this, you know. But then when we get this, and then we feel that we're not experiencing it, then we have to rely on concepts, you know. So like we get it, you know. It's like, you know, like on the gut level, he knows, you know, like through his eyes seeing the mirror, he can't see his head reflected in the mirror. but it causes so much alarm that he runs around looking for his head. Like, have you seen my head? I have not seen it. I've lost my head. Like, how do you know you've lost it? Well, I looked and it's not there. Yeah, so if we know, we know. If we don't know, we don't know. And thinking more about it won't lead to knowing. then move on, like just swallow and move on.
Kind of reminds me
You
of,
had, go ahead.
sorry, well, just like the knowing part, I feel like I get, those insights and then you forget it almost immediately in the next second, you know? I mean, there's this whole thing of like resting in whatever, but to try to expand that period. I'm losing my words here, but uh, you kind of know it in flashes, but immediately you convert it to concepts and frame everything in concept as opposed to just resting in the knowing part. And the trick is how to kind of expand that thing where you don't just start throwing in ideas or concepts on top of an experience. The truth of an experience, you start getting it all.
Yeah, so we have to wean ourselves off addiction to,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's especially, I think, in the educated world is the way we assert control.
Yeah.
It's very different from mostly illiterate world where only a handful of social elites, are educated enough and then have access to these teachings. There, education and thinking has a different plays a different kind of part in people's lives. We, the overeducated West, and God has been thrown out, church has been thrown out, so we're left to our own thinking, and we're seeking for salvation there. And then, if we're not careful, we read these Buddhist teachings, which probably is what brought many of us here. It's like, oh wow, it makes so much sense, And then certain strands of, certain strains of this tradition did encourage a lot of very systematic thinking. And again, like the systematic thinking, back in their own context, they function a little differently. But even that, you have many examples of Mahasiddhas, waking up to how they become addicted to thinking. Then they have the rug pulled from under them by other Mahasiddhas. So now, it's very heady. And one time I was talking, it's a heady in a certain way, people who are attracted to, say, certain aspects of Tibetan Buddhism. Then people who are attracted to certain aspects of Zen are heady in their own way. I remember making a comment about something along these lines, and somebody said, oh, the Zen people, they're really heady, most of them. And that's why they came to Zen, because Zen promises an escape from the headiness. But then even in their engagement with Zen, it's all very, a lot of thoughts going on, and trying to think yourself out of, a bind. Not so easy.
Dr. Lai, I remember a few weeks ago you were commenting about laziness, and
Uh-huh.
Talked about a form of laziness being not trusting, not having confidence.
Yes. Yes.
And it
Right.
seems like, at the end of this Yakhorn chapter,
Yes.
Milarepa's telling Rinchamba to go into the mountains. And
Uh-huh.
Rinchampa's saying, no, I can't do that. I need a bed. I need a
Not
guru.
enough. Yeah.
And I wonder if that's kind of an example. It seems to me that's kind of an example of not.
Yeah. 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 He still, resists, he's still not enough, not enough confidence in the end in himself. And I think sometimes in what I see in the West is people, ironically, right? We overthink because we are not confident that what we have experienced is sufficient. We think, well, surely there has to be more. Now I need to think about it and, maybe even write a book about it. You know, but because I mean, it's not our fault. It's just the cultural patterns that we are embedded in, and so many people I meet, they practicing Dharma and as far as I can tell, sincere and gaining insights, but they're also very good at undermining themselves. Oh, maybe not, It's like, no, what else? It is, yes, enough, So it's a balance, between having confidence, right? Of course, there's also those who, turn up in some whatever wide open forum, on the internet, pontificating about, the natural state and the blah, blah, blah. And, like, it's quite entertaining if you can, stand it. Facebook and, like the natural state and one, it's just so much space and so much space. But then you can track, the turmoil in these folks' life, and it's, I mean, entertaining is maybe too unkind to say, but yeah, it's just like, okay, well, so there's that, right? And then the other side of equally, I think, not helpful is to doubt too much, what you actually know. I think we know, Now that knowing can only be kind of further refined and confirmed by leaning into it and without conceptualizing too much, kind of leaning into it more. I know it's really imprecise, right? Well, that is like in the realm of experience. It's imprecise with regards to words. It's not imprecise with regards to our heart beating faster. Our muscles tensing or relaxing, So perhaps sometimes it's turning attention to how the body is, again, without turning it into a program, right? Somatic Buddhism. Okay, now there's a new brand now. Yes, I'm being evil. I'm
Yeah.
referring to things here, there, and everywhere. Those of you who catch it. Those who don't worry about it. Then, like, oh, it's a lot of, again, blah, 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 right? But there is something to be said about, like, because we're addicted to thought, and I can say that because I have a PhD, so I'm talking about myself. It's good to kind of like be aware, like, addicted to thinking. Actually, maybe bragging or whatever, I'm discovering like I don't think as much as many people that I come across.
Well,
I increasingly kind of become surprised. I cannot claim that this is because of Dharma practice. Sometimes I said, I don't know, maybe it's just getting old, or I said, I think with you guys or some of the group, I said, I don't know. On one hand, you could say that, oh yeah, Dharma practice is working, but there's always the possibility it's just getting old. It's hard to tell what's going on, right? But I'm realizing that, it's sort of like this young friend of mine who, for a while, thought maybe he has a problem with alcohol, So finally, he like started to go to like AA, and then after going a while, he reported back. He said, "Actually, no, I'm not an alcoholic. It's like I was hoping that I was. Then at least, I have an answer to like why I keep messing up, He said, but for sure, I'm pretty sure, he says, I've been going to, and it's like, no, I don't recognize what they're talking about, But nonetheless, he said, I've stopped drinking nonetheless, but it's just that it doesn't resonate. Yeah, likewise, I'm meeting and then talking to more people. I'm like, oh, wow, you really think a lot, Like, I don't know if I think that much. So yeah. Yeah, I think I intuit. I don't think.
mhm.
Yeah. So maybe this is the Myers-Briggs. I think I'm an I, apparently, after a few tests, over different periods of time. The I is pretty clear. So I intuit. So I don't have as much, I think, overt suffering from needing to think about, especially, like some of these things that we're studying.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Yeah. So anyway, that kind of balance between trusting that you are making progress and then trusting that you need guidance and instructions, both, right? And then when you begin to really sincerely do both, you will have more trust in your kind of your realization, so to say, even. Yeah, I know we shy away from using words like that. But the more you kind of, I would say, trust in your realizations, your knowing, long or short, big or small, I would say that in some ways, then one of the signs, maybe not definitive, but one of the signs is you also deepen your trust in the guidance and the instructions. Because whether the external gurus of various types, if they are actually, if your relationship with them is actually working, then both they and yourself are moving closer to recognizing your own nature, or recognizing what is, right? So what is doesn't change, whether it's being introduced to you by someone else or that you're increasingly finding yourself. What is, thusness, suchness, thatness, what is. So it's not so much that you say, oh, I trust myself. Because our ordinary way of talking about trusting is often dualistic in the sense of if I trust myself, then I need to trust less what's outside of myself. Here it's like, it actually one should kind of deepen or reinforce the other. It seems to me that a teacher wants you to rely on them for the purpose of being able to rely on yourself more and more. So Shakyamuni has to die. That's one explanation.
Yeah.
It says, so the Tibetans have a saying, if the father doesn't go away, the son will not grow up. So in that sense, Shakyamuni has to die. Yeah, Rechongpa, is insufferable sometimes. Milarepa puts up with him. And Milarepa does not at all, kind of go, well, Marpa, handled me this way, and therefore I handle my students this way. Milarepa did not at all. As far as his biography that we have available, he understood. And that is another, I think, maybe mistake that we might make, that we think, surely the way our teacher or teachers teach us is the pedagogy that we, if we are enlightened enough, should be using on the next generation. There's no evidence of that in Milarepa.
Mm-hmm.
Milarepa was very patient and very indulgent. Mm-hmm. If you compare to Marpa,
Yeah.
Yeah. So people sometimes talk about crazy wisdom, and then they kind of include Milarepa in this, or wrathful, whatever. Milarepa never, he never did that. Very different style from Marpa. So that here, Rejungpa, 463, when you stay with the Guru and are harmonious, then whatever he does will be pleasant. And so basically, Rejungpa is like, forcing Milarepa and say, why don't you just cooperate with me? It's the Asian way of forcing someone to do something. So it's like, when you stay with the Guru, of course he's talking to his Guru, and are harmonious, then whatever he does will be pleasant. It's like, so help me out so that I can perceive whatever you do to be pleasant. But please come to where I wish. I ask you, please come to the town for a while.
Yeah. It's cool that they could negotiate at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you absolutely will not go into the mountains where there are no other people, then let us go for a while to Poto to teach the Dharma. It's like, okay, I'll go with you. Yeah, Rejungpa, clearly, like his closest disciple, but he was very full of himself.
Yeah.
And Milarepa was very patient with him. Milarepa tries, like, really, you should, do this, and he listens, after a whole chapter, right?
Okay.
In conclusion, he says, no, let's go to town.
Right.
So Milarepa said, okay. if you insist.
That's it.
And I don't know, we don't hear so much Ray Chongpa's side, right? So there's also always that other side, right? This is Milarepa's biography, so somebody is highlighting Milarepa, If we could hear Ray Chongpa's side, Ray Chongpa might be like, he's getting old. I want him to have proper medical care. Let's get closer to town,
Yeah.
There's always that side. So then
Yeah.
when we relate to in real life with our teachers, with our parents, all of that, it's like, the parents would be like, oh, these young people, they would not listen.
Right.
And sometimes the young people have to pretend to be unreasonable because, parents have gotten very stubborn, So there's that other side. Who knows, But certainly, Zangyong Heruka, compiling this, is not concerned about that other side, right? The purpose of this text is not to talk about those things. But for us, I feel like we have to footnote that. Sometimes we go too far. So 39 Song of the Wild Asses. The father Jesummila and his son went to Poto. On the way, as they approached Drin is this place that they come back to again and again. So it's around that area. I think they kind of wander. So Ray said, tonight I will stay here. I will meet with the patrons of Drin. Jason replied, son, first let us go together to Poto, just father and son, without the knowledge of the other monks, disciples' sons, or benefactors. At this, Ray Chongpa grudgingly went. So Ray Chongpa, like, I need to do some, what do you call it? Donor maintenance.
Fundraising, yeah.
Yeah, I need to do some fundraising. I need to
Right.
keep some public relations,
Yeah.
So he's managing all of Milarepa's affairs, so to say, It's like, I need to go see those donors, But Milarepa says, no, just the two of us, So grudgingly he went. Ray Chongpa, you go and fetch some water. I will build a fire. So Ray Chongpa went to get water, and when he obtained it, he arrived upon a slope in the center of the vast, spacious, and beautiful field between Poto and Kipuk Cave. There, a wild ass was giving birth to her foal. Then to each of them, the mother and child wild asses again was born another. Then again to each of those, another was born. This gradually continued until 100. Yeah.
Wow.
So this is some kind of, anyway, this is some kind of like, Jedi mind tricks going on again. Maybe Milarepa, conjure it, or anyway. So then Ray Chongpa, these wild asses are more wonderful than those on Beltang, and stood there for a while, kind of distracted from his carrying of his water. Meanwhile, the guru has built a fire. Then he opened up, right? Ray Chongpa's text, right? Because Ray Chongpa has gone to India and come back with the goods. So that is part of Ray Chongpa's basis of being very proud. Like he has been now more exposure, so to say, to the Dharma than his Lama, right? Within a state of great compassion, he said with words of truth, the Dharma cycles of the formless Takinis and so forth that I have sent to be searched for in India I pray that the Dakinis hold and protect within space these teachings and things that are beneficial for sentient beings. And the black mantra of the Tirthakas and so forth, may the Dharmapala set aside such teachings and that which will be harmful to sentient beings. Then reflecting for a short while and in the fire, he burned all but a few special scrolls. Because Rechungpa also learned the quote-unquote black mantra of the Tirthakas. So if you recall, he went, he insisted on going, and Milarepa says, you don't need to go, we have what we need already. I have what is necessary. You don't need to go. He insists on going, then Milarepa says, okay, if you are going to go, then there are these Dharma cycles of the formless Dakinis that Marpa did not bring back, that we heard rumors about, so to say. So if you insist, then go obtain this cycle. This will be beneficial. But it says that he also decided to learn the dark arts, so to say. So he brought back those things as well. So here Milarepa is saying, as for the formless Dharma cycles of the formless Dakinis, please, may the Dakinis take good care of them. And as for the dark arts, may the Dharma protectors keep them and not let them spread. Then he burned all of them, except for a few special scrolls. And those were passed down, those later. So there's a context to Changyong Heruka saying this. So back in Rinpoche's vision, one of the more powerful wild asses became a wolf and chased all of the other wild asses over the pass. Then Rinpoche nervously thought, oh, I've been distracted. So he says, okay, I better go back. So then as he got closer, he could smell paper burning. So bear in mind, paper burning is not common. Paper is very precious. So he could tell, wait a minute, where would there be paper in this vicinity except for my precious books that I brought back? So then he approached and saw all of the manual covers lying there, flat and empty, in the state of deep vexation. Where have my texts gone? And so then Milarepa said, you took so long to fetch the water, I thought that you had died. Thinking you are dead, I have no use for these books. So I burned them. So I burned all of these useless texts. It took you so long. Then Rinpoche, with the pride, same pride as before, thought, my guru has such anger and attachment that he would dare do something like this to me. Maybe I should go back to be in the presence of Tipupa, or else go to another land. Like I'm going to go back to India, to the real deal. Go to another land. With his faith completely lost, Rinpoche remained there, silent for a while, shocked, devastated. Then he said, because I stayed and watched the show of 100 wild asses and their falls, I suffered a loss, going to India with the goal that the Jitsen gave to me himself, and disregarding the fatigue of my body, speech, and mind. All of that are completely meaningless. I will just go somewhere else. And thus he displayed many airs and expressions for having lost his faith. Then Mila said, Rinpoche, my son, you don't have to lose your faith. This is the result you have reaped from your own distraction at the show. If you like shows, I will give you a show to watch. Now look. So now, Milarepa, using his powers, So above Milarepa's head appeared a precious throne, with a lotus and the sun and moon the seat. On top of that, Marpa himself, inseparable from Vajradhara. On either side of Milarepa's eyes and ears was the sun and moon. From his two nostrils came light rays like strands of yarn radiating with 5 colors. From between eyebrows, a circlet of hair from which various lights radiated. On his tongue was an 8-petaled lotus on which sat a sun and moon the seat. On top of this were all of the Sanskrit letters made of light. So all of these, and in that state, Milarepa gave the following instruction. Listen now, my son Rechungpa. There upon the crown of my head is a jeweled throne hoisted by lions. Upon the seat of a lotus sun and moon is Marpa, so kind, not separate from Vajradhara. All of the other lineage gurus surround him like a string of pearls. If you know how to look with the eye of faith, all the blessings you desire will fall like rain. Son, if something is wondrous, then this is wondrous. Though the wild ass show was great, they are only animals. Son Rechungpa, listen again. From the top, from above the tips of my ears is the sun and moon. They shine in a manner of rainbow. They are the unobscured expansion of luminosity, means, and wisdom in perfect union. So, if you want to be impressed, you should be impressed by this and not those wild asses. Rechungpa now listens still. From the nostril of my nose radiate light rays of the 5 colors. They shine like the threads of precious jewels, the very essence of secret mantra. And it is the wind energy, control of the wind energy, which is now entering, penetrating the central channel. It is a sign of training in prana's vajra recitation. So this is what's wondrous, not those wild asses. Then this ray of light from in between. This is the light to incite the Buddha's compassion. The next is the voice from the tongue, the 8-petaled lotus, sun, the Sanskrit letters. It says, if you know how to look with the eye of respect, all dharma will dawn as your own speech. And then finally, right, in the heart center of the Vajra body is a precious knot blazing with light, nature of the unchanging 3 kayas. So he sang, and so then Rechungpa sat there in resentment. With his eyes averted elsewhere. He wasn't having any of it. Then he said, I didn't knowingly do anything bad. The show of the wild asses was more interesting. In showing his signs of accomplishment, the Jason did not engage in any negativity. Now please give back my text. Yeah, so his eyes averted elsewhere. He sat in resentment. He felt wronged, He says, I didn't do anything wrong. Yeah. And so he didn't really see this display because his eyes were averted. He didn't want to see. And Milarepa is pointing to him, telling him. Milarepa is not just saying, I have these. Milarepa is also saying, you have these too. Yeah, so it says, if you know how to look, if you pay attention, So the point of the wild asses over there is he has gotten too familiar with Milarepa. He's not learning anymore. So he finds, other things more interesting. So the wild asses is just one, one other thing more interesting. And going to India, meeting the great teachers there, another thing more interesting. Coming back with these precious books, new technology, more interesting. Yeah. So Milarepa is saying, within yourself, there are these qualities. And I have actualized these qualities. Can you see them? And it says, no. Trungpa sat in resentment. He continued to sit in resentment. Then getting up, he stomped around, and sitting again, he propped his chin up with his hand, with elbows on his knees, and began humming a song. He's pouting,
Yeah,
Pouting.
channeling his 5-year-old.
Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, the inside and outside of the Jasun's body became transparent and luminous. At his secret center was Chatupita, at his navel center Chakasamvara, in his heart center Hevajra, in the throat center Mahamaya, at his forehead center Buddhakapala, and at his crown Guhya Samaja, each with their retinue deities. Yeah. 6 of the major highest yoga tantra mandalas, all present. But Rechungpa is, wrapped up in his resentment and his, of being unfairly treated. Everything within the rainbow tent was radiant without any essence. Displaying this vividly and brightly, he then sang another song. Again, patiently saying, Rechungpa, pay attention. The body of this yogi here is the dependently arisen palace of goddesses. Within reside the assemblies of victorious deities. At my secret center, the chakra of sustaining bliss, are the deities of Chatupita. The mandala of undefiled bliss expands. It is the co-emergent wisdom kaya. So it's describing basically, in more detail. The point here, is that within Milarepa's body is the complete mandala of all the deities. Thus he sang, 470, and Rechungpa said, the signs of the Jigsun's accomplishment are wondrous indeed, but I don't have my text, so I'm not impressed. Please give me my text.
I love that. Oh.
Then the Jigsun moved around the area unimpeded by rocks, boulders, and any objects at all, walked in and out of the cave. He zipped around riding on a boulder, then went to the river, sat directly on the surface, levitated, fire blazed from his body, water was sprouting from his body, emanated his body many times, and sang another song. And of course, the point is, Rechungpa 471, the Jigsun signs of accomplishments are like a children's play. All of this haphazard behavior is not impressive at all. It is just irritating. If you don't have great compassion, then give me back my text. If you have great compassion, then please give me back my text.
Crazy.
Yeah. And then the Jigsun said, son, don't lose your faith in your father. If you can supplicate, all phenomenal existence will dawn as your text. Supplicate to me that your experiences will be sustained spontaneously. Spontaneously means naturally, without too much effort. He says, if you know how to look, everything will appear as the text that you need. Then Milarepa went to a narrow path that the merchants of Jin had used and had been blocked by a boulder. As though it were a mound of dough, he cut the boulder, lifted it like water, stamped it down like mud. Then he took the boulder and with one hand threw it into the great river down in the valley, and after that sang this song of realization. Chongpa said, if you perform the miracle of restoring my text, then that will make me give rise to faith. Other than that, I'm not impressed.
Stubborn.
And then using his garment as wings, Jetson flew off into the sky and sang another song, right? Then Milarepa showed these miracles, 472. Aside from merely watching them, Rechungpa still had no desire to rouse any faith. Then the Jetson sang using his garments as wings, soared into the sky. While circling around, he sang another song. Here in this song, 473. I, the All-Father Milarepa, this magical body that I displayed, this wondrous and miraculous show, you didn't think it was great at all, but the emanation of 100 wild asses and foals. You thought that show was truly great. This is a sign, Rechungpa, of your incorrect view. All the various miracles I performed still could not make you give rise to faith. Faithless disciples of this polluted age, when I think of them, this yogi feels sad. Oh, Rechungpa, listen here. Solid wood and horns that are hard, if you try to bend them, then they will be bent. But there's no bending of your heart and mind. Please bend your mind from within, Rechungpa. Tigers of the south and wild yaks of the north, if you try to tame them, they will be tamed. But you won't tame your self-clinging. Tame your strong self-clinging, Rechungpa. Birds of the sky and mice of the earth, if you try to seize them, no matter how hard normally it is to catch them, you can catch them. But if you don't seize your confused presence of mind, then it's useless. Then you should seize your confusion with mindfulness. The Dharma of hearing and the Dharma of contemplating, if you train in them, then intellectual understanding comes. But there's no way to understand intellectually your own insubstantial mind. Meditate, cultivate, recognizing this unborn mind itself, Rechungpa. A loving father and kind-hearted mother, if you try to leave them, then they can be left. But you won't leave this bad attitude and high self-regard. Leave your bad attitude and self-regard, Rechungpa. The home of your fatherland and the wealth therein, if you try to abandon them, they can surely be abandoned. But you won't abandon this desire for happiness and comfort if you don't do something about this. Abandon the ignorant sleep of a corpse. Look at your own face, mind itself. Finally, the Lord of Death, the kings and the queens, all the powerful ones may negotiate with you, but not the Lord of Death. Finally, 474, dispel your mind stream's negative perceptions. Let rest your conduct's negative airs. Look at your mind stream's coarse way of thinking. Leave behind your wrong views, this demonic obstacle. Abandon the demon friend of self-clinging. At death, I'll have no last testament other than this. And in life, I have no other hard advice but this. Hold this within your mind stream. And then it says, he lifted higher and higher until he disappeared. Then deep regret arose in Rechungpa, and uncommon faith arose within him. He thought, now the Jetson is gone. Since my mind was not tame, I wouldn't let go of a few measly texts. And then, though the Guru Jisun showed all these miracles, still faith didn't arise. Now, out of disgust with me, he is gone. Someone with wrong views, such as I, cannot go to where he has gone, to this celestial realm. What use are any texts without the Guru? I will throw myself off this cliff, thinking this. Then, with all his might, he jumped off the cliff. With his body lying there, broken on the side of a rock, the shadow of the Jisun, who was flying in the air, fell upon him. Then, wailing with lamenting melody, he tried to fly up after the Jisun, but he could not get his body to fly. Then on foot he ran, stepping on the shadow of Milarepa's body as he followed after him. When he arrived at the upper side of the red rock, from a hollow of the inside of the rock cliff, Rechungpa heard a voice and could see some bodily form that inexplicably appeared there. There the Jisun had emanated 3 bodily forms. The form in the center sang the song of realization, accompanied by the forms on the left and right in response to Rechungpa's repenting cry. So finally, Milarepa, got through to him. Yeah, so Rechungpa.
Pretty good. Wow, this is the most action-packed chapter we've had so far.
Yes. And so after all of this, then Milarepa says, by the way, the formless Dakini, those texts I did not burn. He said, I burned all your debate texts and all your black magic texts. Those are the ones I burned. He said, those we don't need. So the formless Dakini teachings have come down to present time. I think the Drupa Kagyu are kind of like the main holders of that cycle. How actively they are practiced, I don't know, but at least the transmission lineage continues, the formless Dakini. Drupa Kagyu lineage in particular seem to have kept many of Rechungpa's transmissions. Yeah, so 476, that is when, here Rechungpa, he tells Rechungpa, I didn't burn, what's most important. Son Rechungpa, whom I raised since you were small, you were sent to gather key instructions, but with so many textbooks on debate, I feared you'd become someone who just talks about scripture. Mm-hmm. You hope to lay out the seat of a meditator, but with so much of this mere talk, I fear you will lay out the shoes of some great teacher. Meaning, you just have the shoes, you don't have the teacher. You have the text, you don't have the meaning. Mm-hmm. You hope that by knowing the single point, all will be liberated. But with so many conventional terms, I fear that by knowing much, you'll not understand that single point. You were sent to seek out the genuine Dharma, But with the accumulation of so much karma, I fear you've become someone with attachment and aggression. The Dharma that I sent you to find has flown in between the rocks. Now it is in the hands of the Dakinis. If you supplicate, then they will bestow it. All the black mantra, the magic, and so forth, I threw into the fire's blaze, and it is offered to the Bhagavan Agni Deva. Since this benefits everyone, self and other, I am satisfied. This benefits everyone, as in, these dark arts. Burning this, I have no regret. Son, don't have great anger. It will scorch your mind stream. Don't suffer too much. Your body and mind will be wasted. Don't fabricate too much. Don't plan too much. You just rest and relax. Repay the kindness of your guru. And then it says in that moment, those texts of the formless Dakinis reappeared because Milarepa sent them to the Dakinis. Then they reappeared, fell into Rechungpa's hand. He never was separated from the view that the Guru was the Buddha in person. So at this point, finally, I think his pride was defeated. So he went to India, he got this very important thing. Now, in a way, Milarepa is saying, until I give them to you, they are only a source of your attachment and aversion. Then calling his Dharma brothers and other students, they all get it. And so now, after this exchange between him and his teacher, then they again went to see the rest, because there's always a band of disciples following them around. Then they held a feast as a welcoming gift for Rechungpa's return. In the row of the assembly, Seven Repa said to Rechungpa, it seems you went to India to get the key instructions and knowledge of the Jitsin's prophecy. Now, if someone debates us, how shall we defeat them? Debate and magic are the two modes of defeating, impressing the public. So that's the purpose of learning magic. You read in it's common in India that to kind of and sometimes they say it was done to kind of protect the integrity of the teachings. So yes, there were times that out of necessity, the Buddhists also need to know their magic. Otherwise, people are like, you just know the books. And knowing magic itself also not enough. You also need to know debate. And so there was some kind of purpose for these things. Yeah? So immediately, these guys, when they finally, for them, their first time they're meeting Rechungpa coming back from India. Then the Jitsin said, Rechungpa, tell of the manner of defeating the debaters according to your Dharma cycles of the formless Dakinis. Then Rechungpa offered this of defeating the debaters. With the lineage of the great Vajradhara, defeat the debaters of lineages to be rebuked. With the Guru Buddharepa, defeat the debaters who are desirous gurus. With the whispered lineage key instructions of the path of means, defeat the debaters who are demons fabricated by mind. With equal taste, the mirror of outer phenomena. So here is, it's basically an inventory of the contents of this cycle of formless Dakinis. Yeah, so these are what's inside this. Right? It's like a chapter summary, basically. Thus he sang, the Jisun say, this way of defeating the debaters is excellent indeed. In addition to that, you need these key points of view and meditation. So this is, the view is wisdom, which is empty. The meditation is luminosity free of fixation. This luminosity is knowing. It's not light. It's poetic. This knowing mind, this knowing that is free of fixation. Right now, this knowing it's all entangled with objects that is known. Then samsara is all. The conduct is the continual stream of non-attachment. So non-attachment isn't, like not caring. It is not like a blur state of mind. In fact, you are engaged with all the sense experiences, but they have no hold on you. It's what Milarepa is describing. The fruition is nakedness free of stains. With this view, the wisdom that is empty, there is the danger of straying into mere talk. If you don't develop certainty in reality, words will not liberate the clinging to a self. Therefore, certainty is extremely important. So clinging to self is the target of all these teachings on wisdom, yeah? Emptiness, emptiness of inherent existence, emptiness of emptiness, all of that, In a way, he's saying, well, you want to know if they're working or not? Well, just look at how much clinging still remains to I. If it is still very strong, then never mind, you have mastered all the different, logical, statements and debate, and they're not, they're not going to solve your problems. With this meditation, luminosity free of fixation, knowing without being stuck, there is the danger of straying into mere abiding. So here, each of it, right? He's pointing out with regards to view. The danger is mere talk. With regards to holding this awareness, this knowing, this rikpa, the danger is mere abiding. That means a superficial facsimile of this knowing is a kind of a dull state of being present. And so it says, if wisdom does not dawn from within, that means if this knowing is not clear, vibrant, sharp, then you may abide stably, there's no liberation. So the two qualities of the mind that we have to cultivate is stable, right? But not just stable, but radiant. But if you have stable, but you don't have radiance, you will not be freed. So wisdom won't develop from dullness and agitation. Thus, undistracted mindfulness is very important. With regards to the view, certainty is important. Certainty can be confirmed by how much self-grasping you are still entangled with. Undistracted mindfulness is not a narrow type of undistracted. Meaning like, I don't want to look left and right. Now, it's also not like, walking around like It's neither of those. So that's why it says downness and agitation. We're not, those are both like enemies of this undistracted mindfulness. Solinus Dugung Kyabgun, in talking about developing this kind of mindfulness, he uses these examples that I think people, when they listen, they don't really think through like the implications of that. He says, so he uses this phrase, which I think is commonly used, single-pointed mind, or this undistracted mindfulness. A lot of times people mistake that and think it's like a single-pointed like laser, single-pointed, but it's not talking about that. And so when he gives example, he says, or he gives example of how you practice. He says, so when you're driving, he says you can focus your mind on like the next traffic light and you drive. See, clearly he's not talking about single-minded traffic light. You get killed before you get to the next stop, Yeah, it's not. It's like your senses are all awake too, right? All that is needed for driving. But you are clear that, your reference point is that traffic light. Yeah? Because he started in this explanation with how in the old days, you might be trained by, you're going on a journey on a horse. And then it says, now, focus your mind on the boulder, right over there. So then you get closer and closer to the boulder. And then from there, now focus next on that mountain range over there. So the whole time, so of course, when you're sitting on a horse or yak, it's a little less dangerous than when you're driving on the streets, because the impact will not kill you immediately. But nonetheless, either of those activities, you're going to fall off your horse. If you think your meditation, like the conventional way of thinking about meditation, you're going to fall off your horse and get trampled. Likewise, you're driving, when single pointed doesn't mean, you don't hear other cars, you don't see other cars, you'll be in trouble, So this undistracted mindfulness is senses are all, the sense doors are open. You are radiant, the mind is sharp, the mind knows, but is not being dragged around by what it knows, which is our current.
Yeah.
All right. And then with this conduct, the continual stream of non-attachment. So what is conduct? Is practicing, not getting entangled. But here the danger of straying into improper behavior. So improper behavior, because here, right, when it comes to conduct, it says we can basically distill it to don't be entangled. But then this idea of don't be entangled might get us in trouble because we think the more specific rules I don't have to follow. I've gone beyond rules. If the view and meditation don't dawn as the companion of behavior, then yogic discipline becomes a friend of the 8 worldly concerns. And therefore, being free of attachment and obscurations is very important. So for Milarepa, right, he did not have the ordination of a monk or a nun and all those kind of external trappings. Right? His wandering disciples also didn't have those external trappings. And he says, if you're able to practice without that is very good. But then because you don't have these external trappings, or we call it trappings, but call it something else, would be you don't have the support of these. You don't have the support that the Buddha has provided. Then there is the danger of straying into improper behavior. The fruition that is nakedness free of stains has the danger of being clothed in the garments of characteristics. If confusion doesn't collapse from within, you just meditate with a mental aspiration, will be of little meaning. Therefore, the collapse of confusion is very important. Here, I think to me, it's saying, sometimes when we look at the teachings like Mahamudra and this and that, Dzogchen or whatever, it has this tendency of focus on nakedness free of stains, blah, 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 right? And he's saying, but the litmus test is, has confusion been dispelled?
Right.
And this is sort of like one time I said, I witnessed this. My teacher was having a chit chat with this person who is a Dharma person, but she's new to Rinpoche's style, and but she was very excited about taking the result as the path. And she said, I love these teachings, taking the result as the path, which is a standard kind of Vajrayana advertisement, right? And Dzogchen, Mahamudra or whatever, And she just was beaming, I'm like, uh-oh. I was like, uh-oh. Let's see what Rinpoche is going to say, And Rinpoche says, oh, yes. Then Rinpoche says, but I really love, those practices that takes the cause as the cause. Because she's saying, I love those teachings that takes the result as the cause. And she said, I love those teachings that takes the cause as the cause. And so this woman was like, eh? I mean, she didn't know otherwise. She thought, she was expressing the best, right? Then Rinpoche said, right now, by definition, we don't know what the result is. That's the definition of being confused. He says, so as much as I like to take the result as the cause, I'm not sure what I'm taking. But right now, being in a state of confusion, I know what confusion is. So I have some place to start. And I'm so grateful that the Buddha taught where we can start. So here, he's saying, we can say, fruition is nakedness free of stains. But that's all we should say. Saying more than that, it becomes the danger of being clothed in garments of characteristics. And the true test, he says, is if confusion doesn't collapse from within, then to say more about the fruit is this, the result is this, the result is that, then yes, you have strayed off. Then you just meditate with a mental aspiration. You're just like, may I have the 10 powers, may I have the 4 fearlessness. Yeah, good, making aspirations, of course. But then if you get stuck there, then this means little, So therefore, the collapse of confusion is very important.
Dr. Lai,
Yes.
I'm struck by what you said at the beginning that, you don't think so much anymore. And, right? And
Yeah.
if we
Or as much as I as much as other people seems to be thinking.
Yeah. So, I mean, it does seem fair that two things that strike me from this chapter, which I really love, and one of them is that the danger, the more you know, the more you can get entangled in,
Yeah,
confused
yeah.
about. So that's where we are. We've been looking at this stuff a long time,
Mhm.
and it's very easy to build a little nest or something out of what we
Mhm.
think we know and
Mhm.
prevent, the actual realization that he's pointing to. But the second thing is, it sounds like what he's saying at the end is really, if you're doing it right, life should be easier.
Mhm.
There should be more compassion in your life. There should be more
Yes.
clarity. There should be more, um, everything should be less
Yes.
complicated. It just should be that way. And if it's
Yes.
not that way, then look at what you're doing. Because
I think again and again in his songs, he always points in that direction. That there's a lot of complexity in whether tantric technique or sutric theory or blah blah blah. And he says, but then, you know, when it comes right down to it,
right,
uh, other mental defilements still the boss of you, basically.
yeah. I mean, we were just in retreat, and one of the people in the retreat, out of the 7 of us, is a person who spends all her time at retreat centers
Mm-hmm.
practicing,
Literally.
literally, one to another. And she was the most irritating, horrible person, and that's like we've all seen that, right? You see these
Yeah,
people that it's like
yeah,
expert at Dharma. She was the Chopin, she could do all the ritual
yeah.
things.
Right,
She was
right,
horrible. She was
right.
horrible to the rest of us. It was like, wait a minute, something wrong here. you know? Anyway,
Retreat master hired her, I think.
maybe so. I kept saying, is this Atisha's T-boy?
Yeah, I think just boy, right?
Atisha's T-boy. But in any way, I
Yes,
reflected
yes,
that just about myself too, that it's like it doesn't matter what
right.
credentials I've accumulated if I'm
Yeah.
mean or selfish or whatever.
Yeah, sometimes, we get carried away and then we forget, like just be a decent person, Common decency seems to go out the window.
Sometimes.
Yeah, this chapter, huh?
Well, the other thing I love about this chapter is how stubborn Rechungpa is, which
Oh,
I
yes, yes.
totally relate to. But
But, right.
I really like those books,
It's just very honest,
Right.
like we say, he's behaving like a 5-year-old. And yeah, that's mostly when afflictive emotions take over. We are all reduced to being 5-year-olds stomping around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, true.
Yeah, so towards the end is finally when Gampopa turns up,
Yeah.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see that chapter. We're getting there, Yeah. So anyway, I think we'll stop here.
Thank you.
We finish the whole chapter, so to say,
What a good chapter.
It was very innocent, just to see the wild asses, so to say, like, yeah, you kind of, want to side with Rechungpa and say, what, that was just something innocent. Why are you making such a big deal out of it? You got to burn my books. It always seems so reasonable, whatever we are doing.
Right.
I mean, our confusion always seems so reasonable. therein lies the problem.
There was a naivety to him too. It's like, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm thinking, turning into wolves, that would tip me off that something is afoot here.
Yes, right.
Like, suddenly it's like, this is a dream or something, but no, he was so naive and just like,
Yeah, it's like dung 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 dung, and it's like ooh.
that's the 5-year-old, right?
Yeah,
Anyway,
and it's being sent
that
go
was great.
get water because he's building a fire, and if you want to eat tonight,
Yeah.
so right before that, he's talking about how all I need is reasonable, basic, like being alive, right? The 8 uncertainties. He's saying that. So Milarepa now, okay, let's walk the talk, I start the fire, you bring the water, we'll have a meal. But then he gets distracted by
Facebook. TikTok.
yeah, Facebook, correct.
Yeah, TikTok.
All the frolicking, wild asses
Right.
and predatory wolves. And before long, either we feel that we should join the wolves, or we should defend the wild asses, and yeah. Okay, so
This was great.
hopefully next weekend, I don't know, maybe next Sunday we'll meet again. Otherwise, I know you guys are continuing to meet, and so we will go from there.
All right. Well, thanks so
Thank you
much.
so much.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.